Hi, classmates. So, based on a Christian worldview, psychopathology is difficult to define because there are so many components to think about. So, I would think about it as our brain is an organ, and sometimes it needs treatment. Sometimes people are born with disorders of the brain, just like we're born with physical disorders. I would also incorporate Kring and Johnson 2021's three characteristics, which include personal distress, disability and dysfunction, and violation of social norms. And I would also incorporate that these impairments can be a result of a combination of biological, physical, social, and cultural influences. And so it's important to remember that it's not just a result of one thing, but a result of many things. Now, when Jesus was healing the ill, in Matthew 4:24, the Bible says, they brought to him all who were ill, those suffering with various diseases and pains, demoniacs, epileptics, paralytics, and he healed them. Demoniac was the term used for those believed to be possessed by demons. In this case, the Bible doesn't really specify if they're actually possessed by demons or if they were mentally ill. There are places in the Bible, like when Jesus cast out the demons into the swine, where it specifies that those were indeed demons. And so we know that they were, but in other places in the Bible, it's not really clear. But the point is that Jesus treated those exhibiting those symptoms the same as he did those exhibiting physical symptoms of physical disorders. And so I would hope as a clinician to treat mental illness the same. Now, the Bible talks about that outward abnormality, like I was just talking about, as demon possession, but at times it's implied that any illness is a result of living in sin and being punished for that sin. There's not much in the New Testament about that. This is more Old Testament. But here in the Bible Belt, it's often still looked at as punishment for sin, or they should just pray more, and or they must be living in sin, and then they wouldn't be dealing with these mental disorders. The Bible speaks more subtly about psychopathology through Job, King David, and others in the Bible as they lament over their circumstances. There are a lot of men who, and women in the Bible, who suffer clearly from anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, as we see them crying out to God for help and to save them from themselves and from their enemies. And I think that that's important to remember as well, though it doesn't specify abnormal. I believe that would go under that umbrella of psychopathology. That being said, I do believe that all abnormalities are a result of sin. They're a result of the fall. Before Adam and Eve bit into that fruit, and even for a time after, there was no illness to speak of on the earth, either mental or otherwise. People lived significantly longer than they do now because disease had not yet taken root on the earth. And over time, as we continued to sin, it started with Adam and Eve, but we continued to sin and poison our bodies and the earth. People started dying of diseases, and we started seeing these disorders. An individual suffering from mental illness should not be stigmatized, and it should not be assumed that they are dealing with what they're dealing with as a result of their own direct sin. Rather, just as physical ailments plague some, mental illness plagues others, and it likely has nothing to do with their own sin, but rather just a result of the fall and generations after that of us continuing to live in sin. Psychopathology is as complicated to define in the secular view as it is in the Christian view. An article I read by Brun and Hochberg, 2013, defines psychopathology as anything that is outside of the normal development across the lifespan. And this was geared towards children and how much more disorders and impairments we're seeing both physically and emotionally in kids as time goes on. However, this article talks about these changes being a result of evolution of bacteria and environmental issues, which I thought was really interesting because that's very similar to the Christian worldview of these things being a result of sin. They just call it evolution. So I found that to be very, very interesting. Jesus spent his life healing the sick and brokenhearted. Psalm 147:3 says he heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. I believe that we in the field of psychology are called to walk with those afflicted just as Jesus did, and treat those afflicted just as Jesus did. And I believe that we are blessed to be in that calling, and that we can integrate psychology and theology to inform our treatment practices. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to hearing what others' definitions of psychopathology from the Christian worldview are.